How do you deliver services as an artist or as a teacher, teaching artist becomes even more of a challenge. So sometimes it's just through a phone call. Sometimes it's dropping something in the mail and then walking it through the art piece through walking it through with the child with a phone call. Sometimes they do have a phone and Facebook. Maybe they can't do Zooms. They don't know how, or the app's not on the phone, or mama said no. So my thing is to try to reach the child through whatever format you can reach them.
Right. So, as in the last times we've talked, I have so many questions and would want this to go on for a long time, but I'm also trying to figure out ways of doing fairly short, almost unedited pieces and putting them up and then coming back. So with your permission, two more questions. One is, can we keep talking?
Yes.
2 times. Does that work for you?
We can keep talking.
Okay. And like I, for instance, would love to talk with you about whether any of those kids like doing video at the home that you're going to in the pod. If they've got a phone or any other form of video capacity, they could videotape that. And what does that mean? In more general terms, I'm interested in your thoughts, and both now and into the future, not only about how to engage them and the students in their education, but also how to engage students with the community. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts regarding that.
Well, I think the physicality of community is the challenge. How do you do that safely? How do you do that distance? How do you do that if there are not enough masks in that family? You know, so first the masks. So I wear mine when I leave the house. I do believe in the responsibility of me not putting someone else at risk. If I'm asymptomatic or I got exposed yesterday, you know, even if I got tested, my responsibility is to make sure I am practicing the highest level of safety to protect the people around me. So there are organizations and women and men in Syracuse who are making masks for low-income families. I mentioned Pretty Girls Rock before. They have made over 900 masks for families and for healthcare workers in Syracuse, New York, and are continuing to make them. One of my girl ambassadors with the Gage Foundation approached me because I've been donating fabric. I'm a fabriholic. I'm a fabric hoarder, so I decided the way I could help during this pandemic was to let go of that fabric. So I've been giving it out. It was very hard at first, but it's getting easier and easier to do that. So I've had right now there are 3 bags of fabric sitting on the porch waiting for women to pick them up. One of my girl ambassadors, Badra Mishra, with the Gage Foundation, approached me about the Bhutanese community, refugee community here in Syracuse. And so we were able to get them through 5 different mask makers, 300 masks, both children and adult sizes, for her community. I put the word out. I got a message in the newsletter from Noon, neighbors of the Onondaga Nation, appealing for the Onondaga people are appealing for masks for the Navajo nation because of their high death rate and high COVID rate, testing positive, like figures like New York City. So the 5 and then a 6th one have come for fabric or have responded, and they're sending masks out to the Navajo Nation. So if we're able to get masks widely to the community, I think it's going to be easier for kids to participate in things. If people are thoughtful, and how do you get a group of kids together and keep them at distance? How do you put enough distance? And it's not just while you're doing the work, it is how are they getting there? How are they leaving that space? You have to think about all of those things. I think the challenge is the physicality and safety until we have a vaccine.
So let's assume for a minute that we've got a year to 2 years minimum, where being out in the community amongst people and any kind of joint effort is going to be really difficult to monitor and to do safely, especially for people who have a higher level of risk. Let's assume for a minute that that's not the main thing that's going to happen, that you'll figure out. So what I'm wondering is, what else do you figure out? So you figured out you can do these porch front storytelling, and there may be things that could branch from that. When you just mentioned the efforts that are being made to make masks where they're needed, the first question that popped to my head is can the schools be involved in that?
I think that some of the schools and some of the organizations that I've heard about in doing their food giveaways, like we have a couple of our after school people are driving around picking up food for one of the donation sites once a week and delivering them to families that we have identified that have risk of not being able to have enough food in their family, and they have delivered masks at the same time. So I think if some of the services that people are using, that masks are given out with food, for example, if and you made me think, in distributing some of these art projects, I could pop a mask in that mailer too.
Yeah.
So that's a good idea. If we're clever about that, we couple activity with mask giveaways. So and even have them when you have a small gathering at distance, that you have masks offered.
Let me flip the question. Let me flip the question for a minute on you. So let's say you keep thinking about that, and there's ways, and people are already doing lots of work to make and distribute masks, and there's ways of connecting that, as you just said, to the schools they could participate in it. My constant thought is there something that young people, the kids in school of every age, how do they get plugged in as something other than recipients, as actors, as citizens?
Well, I think if you're figuring out ways to get groups of kids together in a safe manner and safe distance, then you can do a lot of the activities that you used to do. You just can't do it with 24 kids or 30 kids, or you have to do it in small groups. So I think adults have to be willing to repeat projects, or to say, okay, I've got 20 kids that I used to work with or who are interested in this, and to do it in groups of 5 and 4 times during that week, or something like that, where you could practice distancing to do it. And then to give kids the opportunity to do what kids do. If you're doing engaged work with kids, part of that engaged work is getting them to be participants in the project. So you would still be able to do that. You just can't do it in the numbers we used to do it in safely. One of the ideas, I have a friend who has some land on the north side, a beautiful tree, and we had talked about a project that I pitched to her called Nancy's Treehouse. And so we're looking at doing it this summer. And that would be pre-booking families or kids to come to a Nancy's Treehouse to do activities. We would have tables up. Each child would get their own table. That we would do, we had talked about, you don't want cross-contamination, so whatever supplies are provided, the supplies and leftovers at the table are theirs to take home. They are touched by us with gloves one time, where we're not contaminating it. You have to be willing to go through the process, though, and that's what we've talked about. You have to disinfect the tables, disinfect the chairs, or have enough that they can even disinfect and rest for a while before your next group. So it would even be looking at, okay, COVID has been said to be on meadows a certain length of time. So if you're using chairs and tables, to maybe have small groups, and to have enough tables and chairs that you can put them away for disinfect them and put them away for a couple days, to double ensure that kids are going to be all right. I think that kind of thoughtfulness has to happen. And looking at drama classes, I had a interesting conversation with a woman who used to live here in Syracuse, Kayla Surratt, and she's Sunita Surratt, and she's at Purdue University. And so she's been looking at, she runs one of their theater groups there. How do we do theater and keep actors safe? You know, how do you keep them 6 feet apart in a production? What plays would lend themselves to that? So how do you keep your production staff safe? I think all of those have to be thought about. So when I look at doing theater with kids, how do I do that? How do I do that safely with them? That's where they're creating. So one of the things that I'm doing with a small group of kids is I'm having them, actually we're starting this week, write about their experience in isolation. What has isolation meant to them? How has it, without giving all their family business away, how has that operated in their family? And how can we make that into a monologue? You know, so we may be looking at the monologue being the most powerful tool of presentation in a time where you can't have multiple people on a stage. Or, you know, it's creative staging, and asking kids, what I'm going to be doing is asking the kids, how do we meet that challenge? If you had 2 people in your play and you need to keep them 6 feet or further apart, how can you produce that play? And I'm hoping they'll come up with things like mimicking movements and you know that they will be some of the problem solvers, and even how theater will present itself in the future.
Thank you. That was wonderful. It's always absolutely amazing to talk with you.
Thank you.
We went almost our 40 minutes that I have on these normal things, although I discovered that I'm looking for 10-minute things. So I might break this up into several because there's very little I want to get rid of. So,
okay.
and I want this to be basically a spontaneous conversation with multiple people. I have in mind eventually getting some of those people together and having a little group discussion. I'll definitely okay. I'll definitely want to follow up with you on the stuff that you're doing, and that you're involved in doing.
Okay.
In particular, I'm interested in knowing or figuring out with you and others whether there's ways that the young people are involved in these processes in one way or another, that people who wanted to learn how to or already were into videotaping or photography do so in the context of what you're creating together, that be an element of it. I'd be interested in having that conversation, and then figuring out together, you know, how does that get presented, or what are they producing, or whatever.
Right.
So I'm interested in all those conversations. As I told you on the phone last week, I thought that this was not going to happen anymore. I can't go into schools personally, and I don't think it's going to be possible for quite a long time. And so everything has to change, and
Yes.
that could be a good thing. There's a lot of awful things, but everything needs to change.
I think once I really needed that month of mourning and worry, and kind of going through Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of death.
Yeah.
And so on the other side of that, I think the answer is creativity. We are artists. We are the creative people of our community, the griots, and kids are creative. And they think outside the box often. So I think we have to listen to them. We have to get them engaged in how do we do this? Because that's the question. You can't ignore it. Things have changed until there's a vaccination. And that may be a year, 2 years, who knows? But we can't stop art, and we can't stop engagement, and we can't stop challenging our kids. They are the problem solvers of tomorrow. As I don't think that this virus will ever be gone. It may, they're talking even short-term immunity, even with a vaccine. So we have to, how do we live? How do we let go of yesterday and how do we move on to tomorrow? And it doesn't have to be about loss. It can be about a different adventure,
Yeah.
a different way of living.